Now we can worry about more important things, like, for instance, is Roughriders one word or two? You know they fought wars over less. Dave is aiming at just playing football. He's got the playoffs in his sights. John's boys are all set to inflict some pain on the Green Riders. McGriggs and the defense are back from the brink and ready to prove they're alive and hitting. Mason is building quite a reputation. He'll try to cement the win with pinpoint passing. Robert leads the league in rushing. He'll give Ottawa a rough ride. All right, time to play, and after the game, I've got some tips about your complexion problem. The most faithful fans in football reside at Taylor Field in Regina, but this Battle of the Roughriders is brought to you courtesy of Ottawa fans who spent the last 3 weeks rallying to save their riders. Ottawa is on the marquee, and that's good news. Welcome now to Regina and to the CFL on CBC. I'm Scott Oak. Ottawa has already registered a major victory in just making this road trip. We could go on at length about the off-field trials and tribulations of the Eastern Riders, but then we'd have to join the game in progress. And the game's the thing now anyway, and Dave Archer knows that if Ottawa wins it, the Eastern Riders have a chance to make a playoff run. Archer arrived at Taylor Field today celebrating a Team USA victory in another sport.
That's right there.
Please, Dave, don't rub it in. James Curry and Chris Cuthbert along to describe the proceedings today. Our crew watched last night's game, and we're hard-pressed to put up with the smugness of Citizen Curry. Go ahead.
I'm not a betting man, but I got to say USA. Am I a betting man? Oh, yes, I am. Thank you.
Bad enough to lose a bet like that, but especially to a guy who thinks the Team USA won by a field goal last night. That really hurts.
By the way, the tail end of Hurricane Hortense knocked the telecast of periods 2 and 3 off the air in the Maritimes last night. The game will be replayed there tonight, beginning at 7 o'clock local time. Great Canadians that Chris and I are were tempted to engage in some creative editing to alter the outcome. That's it. Whining complete. I only wish that were true. James, let's talk football now. What about the Saskatchewan secondary? How much better must it play today?
Must play much better than what they did last week. This defensive secondary was ranked 3rd in the CFL last year. They're down to 7 this year. Doug Flutie with a makeshift receiving corps last week had a field day. They must play much more intense this afternoon against David Archer.
Off the field, the Ottawa Roughriders got a major reprieve last week, and they get a big boost to their lineup. Profel Greer and Joseph Rogers, 2 outstanding rookies, come back off the injury list, and David Archer has a couple of new weapons to really use today, so those are guys we'll be watching. And we point out that both Ottawa and Saskatchewan have decent schedules to finish the season, so the feeling is the team that wins today could start rolling. Coming up on the B.F. Goodrich TA halftime report from Taylor Field today, the rebirth of Robert Mims. He led the league in rushing in 1991. 5 years later, he's doing it again with Saskatchewan. Now, how about next weekend's CFL schedule that sees the country's 2 best teams, Toronto and Calgary, collide at Skydome? We'll preview that game and hear from 2 of the principals, Messrs. Garcia and Flutie. Powerful wind sweeping Taylor Field, and that's even before James starts to talk. It's on days like this that teams don't want to lose the coin toss, as managing the wind is critical. Ottawa's won this one and deferred to the second quarter. Set now for this all Rough Rider affair. Ottawa versus Saskatchewan, with both harboring playoff hopes and best advised to start the run today. Here are Chris and James. Thanks, Scott. If you're from outside the prairies, this is a gale force wind situation, but if you live in these parts, it's just a nice breeze as we get set for a Sunday afternoon of football.
Well, this is one of those days that you don't mind weighing more than the next guy to you, because I was able to walk straight as you had to walk into that intense wind this morning.
Frank Jagus will get set to kick it off. Battle of the Roughriders, and as Scott mentioned, there's 2 teams with schedules that would suggest that the winner here might be able to go on a pretty good run, and it's been an upset weekend. You saw what happened to the Calgary St. Peters on Friday. Last night, the BC Lions doing it against the Toronto Argonauts, and we're underway here, and Big Jeff Cummins returning that low kickoff up to the 50-yard line. So the Ottawa Roughriders, David Archer will start with good field position and the wind at their back. Archer really buoyed by the victory over Montreal last week, but also a realist and said we've got to play better on offense than we did in the victory over the Alouettes.
Well, they have to find some consistency in their offense. They've had so many personnel changes through the first half of the season, and a lot of injuries have dictated that, but they feel that they're getting healthy now, and Archer's the guy that you like to have pulling the trigger.
First down, Ottawa. Wind send it. They're back, and the give to Sean Daniels, who crashes over midfield. And Daniels has a pickup of 5. A former Ottawa Rough Rider, LeBryant Robinson, with the tackle for Saskatchewan. Here's the offensive lineup for the Rough Riders of Ottawa. Chris Burns, a former Saskatchewan offensive tackle, will be one to watch today. Robert Gordon moves outside. There's Joseph Rogers back in the lineup. And the 2 starting wideouts for David Archer 2 weeks ago against Montreal have been released. 2nd and 5. And John Payne, David Archer, and the Ottawa Rough Riders trying to establish an early ground game. And once again, it's Robinson with the tackle.
Well, this is the type of weather where you have to have a solid ground game. And Sean Daniels is one of those big backs. He's only had 10 carries coming into this game, but if he can get on a roll, he can be a very important part of this offense this afternoon.
Sean's a load at 5'11", 235. John Payne, no stranger to these parts, the 3rd winningest coach in Saskatchewan Rough Rider history. Archer will plunge for the first down and move the yardsticks.
Well, you know, you go back to that running game once again, and if you look at the 2 games that Ottawa has won this year, the running game has been the key element in keeping the ball away from the opponent and led to their success.
That's exactly what John Payne was talking about this morning, and making reference to what the BC Lions did last night as well. At this time of the year, the wind starts to blow, the weather gets more inclement, and you like to see a good ball control ground offense. First down, this time play action. They dump it over the middle, and that's a completion to Joseph Rogers, who returns to the Ottawa lineup, and that's his 36th catch of the year. And Rogers has been outstanding in his first year in the league. Well, we've already heard from LeBryant Robinson today. Bobby Jurison, the all-time sack leader, and Greg Battle, what an addition he has been. Bryce Bevel is a rookie who has been outstanding in the secondary, but Jim Daly really accentuates the positive when he talks about Greg Battle in the middle.
Well, he's nothing but a leader, and we'll touch on that after this play.
2nd and 3 yards. Again, that hot pass over the middle, and Profale Greer was coming out of the backfield and wasn't looking for the ball.
You go back to that point about Greg Battle. This is a veteran linebacker who's been through the wars for 10 seasons in the CFL, a 2-time outstanding defensive player in the league, and what he brings to your defense is that experience, that leadership role where he can direct things from on the field, where young players can learn by example, and he's been a big plus for the Saskatchewan defense.
No offside, guys!
Archer heads to the sidelines, 3rd and 3, and Wayne Lamley is in. 12 of 17 on the year, attempting a 49-yard field goal. The wind to his back, and they had problems with the snap, and Steve Taylor downed on his own side of half by Aaron Ruffin, who broke free, so Ottawa squanders an early scoring opportunity.
You can't squander great opportunities when you get them like this, but a great play by the 2 members of the Saskatchewan secondary, Ruffin and Daniels. Saskatchewan secondary in the opening, but the snap, the wind is going to play havoc on all balls in the air this afternoon. Taylor could not get the ball down for Lamley. Big play for the Saskatchewan Rough Riders.
So it's not just the kickers that have to be concerned today, it's the holders, the long snappers. And that might not be the first problem we see. A problem on the initial play for the Saskatchewan Rough Riders. Kevin Mason had trouble with the snap from center, and Jeff Cummins smothered him quickly.
Well, you know, the big problem that we have, Paul Vida is playing his first game at center today.
There is Kevin Mason making his 4th start, 5th appearance for the Saskatchewan Rough Riders. A couple of weeks ago, showed bright promise with a victory over Winnipeg last week. Showed his resilience, sacked 9 times in the game against the Toronto Argonauts. Came out of it okay, though, and a lot of focus on the offensive line for Saskatchewan in this meeting against Ottawa. 2nd and 11. And pressure on again. Cummins can't bring him down, and the pass tipped at the line. So a big series for the defensive line of the Ottawa Rough Riders.
Well, Jeff Cummins have gotten off to a good start. Last week he had been moved inside to defensive tackle. He's been moved back out to his natural position at defensive end and got great penetration on the first 2 plays by the Saskatchewan Rough Riders. And that's what you have to do. Establish the tempo with your defensive front. Put the pressure on the Saskatchewan quarterback.
Boy, he could have a big day. There was concern in the Saskatchewan camp. Gene Makowski making his first start. Paul Vida's never played center before.
Well, you actually have 2 new offensive linemen for Saskatchewan in today's game.
Robert Gordon is the deep man awaiting the punt of Brent Matic. Line drive into the wind. And at the 26-yard line, it's a 3-yard return after a 31-yard punt. Dave Denal, or Kenny Wilhite with the return. And Tommy Smith on the stop. 4 minutes into this first quarter. Well, we talked about the wind and how it plays havoc with the punters, specialty teams, and even though it's at David Archer's back, that doesn't make it any easier for the quarterback either.
Well, one of the things that will cause the ball to do is sail away from a quarterback and the receiver.
There's now play action, and there's a pass over the middle, drilled, intended for James Ellingson, through his hands, incomplete, and Ellingson paid the price.
Well, I tell you, he got caught in one of those awkward positions where he was extended, and when the defensive back came over the top, he drilled him in the back of the head and made him fold over, and he's up and running back towards the huddle, but an excellent effort by James Ellingson. You get a look at it right here as he goes high for the ball, and the safety Van Bellingham closes, and that's what you expect from your free safety. When the ball is in the air, he has to close and make a play on it.
More than a few drops in the last game for Ottawa against Montreal, but they did prevail 17-6. Trouble with the long snap. And Archer rolling out. He's in trouble. And down goes David Archer as Tommy Smith nails Archer for a loss.
Two former teammates in San Antonio last year. Tommy Smith was San Antonio's most outstanding defensive player, and that time he ran down his former teammate David Archer, but great pursuit. And what you have to do is get on the pursuit angle. He ran him inside out. David Archer's not going to outrun many defensive players, and he had to pay the price once again this season.
25th sack of the year for Saskatchewan, and the 45th allowed by the Ottawa Roughriders. Third down, and Lamley with that breeze at his back. Good kick, and Ruffin mishandles it. That's a live football as Ruffin scampers back, and he'll be downed at the 1-yard line. So the elements are having a huge effect in the early going. A missed field goal by Ottawa. The booming punt, which is 89 yards, has Jim Daly's club in a huge hole.
And as a young quarterback with Mason, this is not the type of field position that you want to have him start a series. And we're going to see Ruffin, he just let that get to his body, and you want to try to get your hands on the ball when it's in flight. And he let it get to his body, and it attacked him, and he made the error, and they have the ball pinned back at the 1-yard line.
Tough spot for Mason to operate. Robert Mims behind him, the leading rusher in the CFL, and Mims with his first carry barely got back to the line, if he did at all. Stacey Evans, a newcomer for the Ottawa Roughriders on their defensive line, made the stop. We talked about Vida and Mikowski in new positions, and that will be interesting to monitor. Curtis Mayfield is third in the CFL in receiving yardage, and of course Donald Narcisse with that impressive streak of 155 games receiving. And it's 2nd and 10 for Saskatchewan at their 1-yard line. Once again, give to Mims, this time up across the 5-yard line. Cummins again involved, says he has the football. But Jake Ireland has blown play dead.
Well, he was down when that ball came free, but a good defensive stance by Ottawa. Nevertheless, Jeff Cummins has come out fired up in the first 2 series defensively and has made 3 of the 4 plays for the Ottawa defense.
6:21 gone, first quarter. Scott talked about time management, and you try and minimize the damage when you're going against a healthy breeze like this. We watched Brett Matich earlier in the warm-up, and he can kick the football into the wind.
But I think this is a point where he's going to take a safety in the game, Chris, because you're going to give Ottawa great field position, so you might as well give them the 2.
And that's exactly what Matich will do. Kill a little bit of time before being flushed out by Sean Reed. And the Ottawa Roughriders are on the board. Matich conceding the safety. And they will kick it off. So the wind advantage used by Ottawa early. Well,
back at Taylor Field. Let's address what happened at BC last night. Are the Lions better than 3-9? Absolutely. We present this evidence. BC's win over the Argos, only seconds to go in the first half. Damon Allen to Ted Alford for a pretty touchdown. That made it 21-8 on the way to a 35-11 BC win. Chris, the Lions are in the playoff picture. They could just as easily have won 4 of their last 5 instead of losing 3 of them.
Absolutely. Thinking about the one that got away last week in Montreal, Saskatchewan will travel out to meet the BC Lions next week. If they're coming off a win here, it would really improve their playoff position.
Couple of flags on the
as
field.
Mason is attending to a minor injury to start the game.
Looked like he lost a bit of skin off that finger. He's been hit on 3 occasions here in the first quarter, the first 2
Major
series.
foul. Face mask. Saskatchewan number 8. First down.
Anthony Drawhorn charged with a major foul, 15 yards, and boy, that is valuable real estate when you consider you're working against the wind in this first quarter.
Well, there's 2 things about a CFL game. There's time management and there's field management. You saw a bit of that with Saskatchewan giving up the safety on the last series. Now they've put themselves in a hole once again with Ottawa with the ball at midfield.
First down, Ottawa. The fake to Greer over the middle, and Robert Gordon has the catch. And Gordon, tough man to bring down inside the 30-yard line. Terrell Ulmer finally wrestled him down, but Robert Gordon is the veteran receiver David Archer likes to go to.
Well, he's one of those guys that you can count on. He has the hands and he reads defensive very well, defensive coverage. One of the things about David Archer, though, when David Archer has success, he throws the ball in between the numbers. He has a tendency sometimes to want to throw to the wide side of the field, but when he's throwing in between the numbers, he's a very efficient passer.
40th catch of the year for Robert Gordon. First down. And Archer going back up top, looking into the end zone, and overthrows Joseph Rogers, who looked like he had a step.
He had a step, but once again, the wind came into play on the play. The ball took off when David Archer put too much gas on it. You got to take a bit off of it, allow the receiver to run underneath it. You don't have to gun it with the wind at your back. Roger runs right past the coverage. Too much from the quarterback.
Roughriders 0 for 3 so far as Bobby Jurison introduces himself to the Ottawa quarterback. 0 for 3 in second down conversions so far.
And you have to wonder how many hits are left in David Archer's body.
Over the middle again, and Joseph Rogers short-armed that, and it's incomplete. You know, you wonder, he's out with a shoulder problem and returns, and Archer told us yesterday he's not quite right yet, but feels like he's got to help this team. And
well, when you're running for a playoff spot and you get to that stretch point of your season, you have to come in and play. Sometimes you have to define the difference between pain and injury, and a lot of young players haven't gotten to that level yet, but that was a very catchable ball, and when you have a secondary that will hit people, you'll make receivers short arm a pass.
Steve Taylor has trouble again. And Taylor this time throwing, and it falls incomplete. Well, Nick Richards was the safety valve there, and that is twice in the opening 8.5 minutes that Ottawa has misfired on a field goal attempt.
Well, that one was all Steve Taylor, I believe, on that play. Jeff Cummins got a good snap back to him. It was a nice tight spiral that you expect when you're the holder. Hit him in a bad spot, the hands. He tried to get the ball down before getting a grasp on it, and it cost Ottawa an opportunity to put more points on the scoreboard. And you can't miss on these opportunities when you have the wind at your back.
Vincent Donaldson broke in.
That penalty is declined. First down.
Richards was an ineligible receiver, so that would have gone for naught anyway.
Well, I think Saskatchewan had that same scenario happen last week in Toronto when Demetrician caught a ball and he had lined up at tight end on a fake punt.
Well, let's see if Kevin Mason can put together a couple of first downs, moving against the wind. Better field position. Mason can't find anybody, and he is going to be dropped again behind the line of scrimmage. Stacey Evans was there. Cummins in the neighborhood as well. As we set the Ottawa defense for you, Jeff Cummins already off to a great afternoon. Stacey Evans is the newcomer. Boy, we've liked the looks of Lamar McGriggs in his couple of games with Ottawa. And Kenny Wilhite has been outstanding both in the secondary and returning punts all year.
I tell you, he's added intensity to this Ottawa defense, and he's brought that nasty streak in that you like to see in a defensive player.
So second down and 12 to go. And once again, heat on, and boy, it's a mismatch on that offensive line right now as Swift Birch gets a sack. That's his 4th of the year.
I tell you, Saskatchewan needs to show concern now for their offensive line. 2 weeks in succession, their young quarterback has taken a tremendous beating. 9 sacks last week they gave up in Toronto, and once again this afternoon they have not slowed down any pass rush from this Ottawa defensive front.
Third down and Matich with Robert Gordon, and there's Kenny Wilhite. Wilhite 5th in all-purpose yards and 7th in punt returns in the CFL. Matich, nice punt considering the conditions. And down goes Wilhite. There is a flag down. Terrell Ulmer, first man down to take Wilhite to the turf. Loss of 1 on the return after the 32-yard punt.
I think we're going to get a holding on this play, and it's going to cost Ottawa some valuable real estate.
Holding. Ottawa number 82. First down.
Willie Hinchcliffe called for holding.
One thing you always expect from a receiver is to be able to hold on to the football, not one of the defenders.
And coming up later today, $1 million. The Woodbine Million. And Skip Away, the favorite. That's coming up after the football game today.
Now, Ottawa is letting a glorious opportunity slip away that they've had here in the first quarter. You got the wind at your back. You got to get points out of it.
Only have 2 on the safety, and Archer was looking again for James Ellingson. Man, it falls incomplete, and well, there's only 4:48 to wind advantage for Ottawa in this first quarter left.
That ball was slightly behind Ellingson, but a tremendous effort nevertheless. Bryce Bevel had excellent inside position, and that's what you expect from your corners. Always play a receiver inside out, force him towards the outside of the field.
Archer just 2 for 7 and 36 yards in this opening quarter. Second and 10, Ottawa. Archer steps up, flag goes down, open receiver, and Greer can't make the catch, and it probably was coming back anyway.
I tell you what the Saskatchewan defense is doing right now. They're disguising their coverage at the line of scrimmage, and they're doing a great job of rotating once Archer is recognized.
Holding. Ottawa number 51. Decline. Third down.
Once Archer is recognized what he thinks the coverage is going to be, and then they're flying back out of that, going to their position that's designated. They have a great defensive scheme going this afternoon, and it's caused the quarterback a lot of confusion.
So Archer will regroup at the bench. Robert Stevenson called for holding, the left guard. High snap for Lamley. And Lamley pulled it down and now delivers the kick. And Rod Harris has the football. Harris over the 30, sprung 3 to the 35 before he's taken down. And Ray Bernard with the tackle. 4:05 to go, first quarter. And the Saskatchewan Roughriders will have the ball when we come back.
Wayne Lamley has saved himself on a couple of occasions this season, pulling down the ball when he expected a block to come short. Shinsky came across his face. He pulled it down, went outside, and got off an excellent kick to save field position.
Kevin Mason trying to kickstart the Saskatchewan offense. First down from his own 35. There's Robert Mims, and he's met by Obi Spanik as he crossed the line of scrimmage, and that Ottawa front is looking tough this afternoon.
I've been impressed with Ottawa's defensive front their past 2 football games. They really shut down Montreal 2 weeks ago when they had a huge crowd back at a home game, and they've come out with that same inspiration and fire. And this is what you expect from a football team all year, not to get a moratorium to play well, but to come out week after week and do it.
Well, Kevin Mason trying to avoid a 4th consecutive 2-and-out situation with 3:20 to play in the first quarter. Here comes that big rush again. Mason elusive over the line and taken out at the 41-yard line. That's Cummins again. And Kevin Mason and the Saskatchewan offense has to go off again.
You know, it really doesn't make any difference how well your young quarterback can read and throw. If he doesn't get the time to pull away from the center, you know, he's not going to stand a chance. And once again, Ottawa took a page out of Toronto's playbook last week with the blitz. And you're going to get younger right here and Knight. They're going to come clean, and he's going to be running for his life. And he can't do that if you expect for him to have a successful game today. Jailbreak once again by Ottawa's defense.
Matic to punt. Like you're trying to draw Ottawa offside, but the Roughriders remain poised at the line. Robert Gordon tries to spin away and finally down at the 42. Well, it's an Ottawa lead, 2-0 with 2:43 left of wind advantage for the Eastern Riders in this first quarter.
Well, Brett Matic has been the best weapon for the Saskatchewan Roughriders here in the first quarter as we get a look at John Payne showing some concern about the lack of productivity of his offense.
Yeah, these two teams showing why they are second last and last in the Canadian Football League in scoring so far. Archer, that little hitch. Gordon brings it back inside, and not much there as Brian Robinson moved out to nail Robert Gordon.
You know, if that play hits, it will hit big, the hit screen. But it's the most difficult pass to throw in the CFL because you have such great pursuit by the players. This league is built on speed and getting to the football, and the Saskatchewan Roughriders, especially Brent Robinson, does a great job of closing to the football.
It's a gain of 1, and a flag goes down. We've got procedure against Ottawa.
Center field.
Ottawa really needs to be concerned right now with their offense. They are not getting anything. They have no continuity moving right now, so they're going to be in a big struggle when they have to face the wind.
Procedure. Ottawa number 53. Still second down.
Big Uzo Okeke, the left tackle
I like
move.
that. You got it out.
I took the shortcut, though. Azuma Okeke.
Well, he's not hard to miss. He's a big man, about 310 pounds, playing that left offensive tackle.
You know what impressed me was that the players voted him to their All-Canadian team a year ago. Second and long, Archer pulls it down and finds a wide open receiver. That's Willie Hinchcliffe, the speedster. And Hinchcliffe has just his third catch of the season, and that's the biggest play for Ottawa in this first quarter. 42 yards from Archer to 82, Willie Hinchcliffe.
Sometimes as defensive secondary players go, you'll gamble, and they got a little mixed up in the coverage. Willie Hinchcliffe blew right past the coverage on the inside. Donaldson checked him. The safety didn't come across. Big play, Ottawa.
So first down out of the shotgun, David Archer, and the receiver fell, and Aaron Ruffin looked like he had an easy pick, and it bounced off the shoulder pad.
Well, I think the wind was a big advantage for Ottawa on that play. Maybe you should take those sunglasses off and play the game and stop trying to look cool. He'd have had an interception.
Right off the numbers.
Ottawa second and 10.
So it's second down, a hurry-up offense employed by Archer as he tries to use as much time with the wind as possible. Flag down as they go to the end zone to Rogers. Incomplete.
I think we're going to get an offsides here. But Ottawa, when Hinchcliffe caught the big pass, seemed like they had something on a roll.
Well, they'll get another play.
They're going to get another play, but, you know, Archer has to learn how to gauge the wind. This is something that's not a...
Offside. Saskatchewan number 93. Repeat second down.
Tim Edwards offside.
Gauging the wind is not an easy thing to do, and he's had several opportunities here in the first quarter where he's just flat out overthrown receivers. Archer last season led the CFL in the efficiency rating. This year he's about 30 points off his pace.
Second and 5. Archer in trouble. Down he goes. Another flag has been thrown in the backfield.
First one in was the heaviest, 98.
Looks like we have another offsides against Saskatchewan, and that will give Ottawa an automatic first down.
Offside. Saskatchewan number 41. First down.
Gary Rogers. In his second game for Saskatchewan, after being reacquired, Montreal let him go when Alfred Payton returned to the CFL.
Well, you know, the good teams don't make those constant small errors, and that's what causes you to lose close games, mental mistakes.
Big reprieve for Ottawa. Let's see what Archer does with it. Looking near the goal line for Gordon. Incomplete. Coverage provided by the veteran Vincent Donaldson. 6th year out of Michigan State.
And once again, Archer not appreciating the wind that he has at his back, putting too much on the football, and it's taking off and it's making it a difficult reception for his receivers to make. You'll see once again, he just sits in, he's just gunning it over the middle, and you can see how the ball takes off with that wind at his back. He has to be able to bring it down, come over the top just a bit more.
Barring a penalty, the final play of the first quarter with the win for Archer. And he looks for Ellingson, and James Ellingson can't hang on. Aaron Ruffin was all over him to make the defensive play.
That was an excellent play by Ruffin to reach around Ellingson and to avoid the interference. And the Saskatchewan Roughriders keeps the Ottawa Roughriders out of the end zone once again.
Will move against the wind in the second quarter.
Well, we've seen how it's been a hindrance for David Archer with the wind at his back, and especially for a kicker kicking into the wind. You like to keep the ball low, and that's the trajectory going over the line of scrimmage, so it's going to be very important for him to be able to get it up over without it getting blocked here.
The distance shouldn't be a factor. It's whether or not he can get it over that oncoming line, and he puts it up. And apparently missed it. So Lamley misses. They've had 2 field goals without even getting a kick away, and now the miss makes it 3-0.
Well, you have to look at the first quarter stats in the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Even though they lost in time of possession and yardage, they actually won that quarter because they only allowed 2 points with all the mistakes that they made. Now Ottawa has the win in their face, and Saskatchewan vice versa with it at their back.
John Payne, a head coach here in the mid-70s. It's all about windy days at Taylor Field. A nice chat with Jim Daly yesterday, an Ottawa native. Coached the GGs, the Sooners, was with the Eastern Riders. Grew up on Sunnyside Avenue, a mile away from what was Lansdowne Park. A big Ottawa Rough Rider fan, but trying to find a way to beat the Eastern Riders this afternoon. Here's another big pressure situation on Kevin Mason as Stacey Evans came clean. And what's happening down that line for the Saskatchewan offense?
I think that's a major concern. I spoke about it a few moments ago. They've had to make some adjustments. They just, over the 2 weeks, have not been able to protect Kevin Mason. And it doesn't make any difference how much promise he has as a young quarterback. He won't get a chance to develop on his back.
Joe Moss likes what he has seen so far out of his defense. And it's 2nd and 10 Saskatchewan. Here they come again. Mason trying to get outside, and he is dropped again behind the line of scrimmage. Lubo Zizakovic.
I tell you, the Saskatchewan offensive line looks like holding gauze up in front of a semi right now. There's no way of stopping anybody, and I think they're going to have to come to the sideline and regroup, because you look here and it's just a jailbreak. Lubo Zizakovic really didn't even have to put a move on John James. It just kept in his pursuit angle, hustled, and brought down the young quarterback for another sack here early in the second quarter.
5 times 2 and out now. Lubo seeing his first action this afternoon and chalks up a sack. And Matic will get to unload with the win for the first time. And he blasts a beauty. Wilhite fielding it back at his 12. And pretty good downfield coverage for Saskatchewan, considering the length of the punt. 63 yards and an 8-yard return.
You know, when you look at the problems that Saskatchewan's having with their offensive line, Pooch Hendrickson is normally the center, and he makes all the offensive line call adjustments at the line of scrimmage. And with him out of there, Paul Vida is doing that today, something he's unaccustomed in doing, and they've had a lot of problems. Mikowski's playing the guard position that Vida normally played, but they need to make some adjustments on the sideline.
Look at a former great Ottawa defensive lineman, Greg Marshall, now the coach of the defensive line for Saskatchewan, that comes up with a big play.
He's become a very solid defensive coordinator here in the CFL, and this is just his first year in that position, but his defense has played well here in the first part of the game, so he has to be very pleased with their productivity.
Got to buy some time for that offense to get untracked.
Well, they've gone away from a lot of the things that they've done. Last week, Robert Mims was held to only 12 yards rushing, and this week he hasn't even gotten untracked.
2nd and 10. Sean Daniels, and he is hit as soon as Archer gave him the football. Tim Edwards was there, Jurison in the neighborhood, and we have all the makings of a very low-scoring game this afternoon.
A very low-scoring game, and that's the way both of these teams came in, the two lowest point production teams in the league, and we've seen defense once again rear its head, and it's a great thing to see, because defenses will win you championships, offenses will bring fans into the stadium, but we've seen two outstanding defensive performances thus far in this game.
Spoken like a former defensive lineman.
I'm a spectator.
Well, Wayne Lamley gets set to kick into that stiff breeze. Here comes the rush from Donaldson. Almost got there. Pretty good kick by Lamley, and Rod Harris at his 49. Harris across midfield. Dropped at the Ottawa 53 by Tommy Henry. 39-yard punt into the breeze.
Back at Taylor Field, here's Ottawa President Jim Durrell. Jim, I know you could have used 2 weeks in Club Med after the last 3 weeks of business in Ottawa, but as it is, you're delighted you and your team had a chance just to make this trip.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here, but I'll tell you, it's only the first step in many, Scott, for a franchise. We've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, that's the reality of the situation. This was all well and good, but what must you do now to ensure that the Roughriders don't have to go through this whole ordeal again next year?
We got to win today, get a full house for Hamilton, and have our fans stick with us the rest of the season. It's critical.
You have to find an equity investor as well?
We'll get one, but they have to see our fans get them.
Jim Durrell breaking into a play-by-play account of the game here, but Jim, I want to thank you for your time and congratulations on all you did in Ottawa in the past 3 weeks.
Thanks, Scott, and thank Ottawa fans. They're the real winners in this one.
All right, Chris, what did you think of Jim Durrell's attempt at play-by-play?
Congratulations to Jim and all the folks. I know Jim Daly, the guy on the other side for the Saskatchewan Roughriders, said there was nobody better qualified to save the Ottawa Roughriders than Jim Durrell. Well, Saskatchewan still looking for its first down of the game. Mason on 2nd down, going up top. Jump ball, and Tommy Henry with great coverage on Curtis Mayfield.
Well, as a cornerback, that's what you want to do, is push the receiver to the sideline.
Well, next Saturday, what a terrific matchup. The Calgary Stampeders and the Toronto Argonauts. Doug Flutie against his former team, and a little extra intrigue in that these two teams both coming off rare losses in the same week.
Well, we're going to get a great opportunity next week to look at the teacher and the student.
And next Sunday, Hamilton and Ottawa, and you heard Jim Durrell and the game plan he's got to win today and win next week, and the Ottawa Roughriders would be knocking on the playoff door. Here's a 55-yard field goal attempt by Frank Jagus, which misses to the right side. And Kenny Wilhite's bringing it out. And Wilhite turns the corner, but a flag goes down as Wilhite down the sidelines up to the 45-yard line. But a flag went down well back.
Well, we're going to get an illegal block that's going to cost Ottawa great field position.
And a real debate going on at the Ottawa bench. Lamar McGriggs. And based on the argument at the Ottawa bench, McGriggs the culprit.
Ottawa number 56. Down.
Jermaine Younger. You know, and those are the type of mistakes that have cost Ottawa this season, when you have an opportunity to get the good field position and you get the illegal block, and generally that comes from a player not hustling fully. If you get to the spot that's designated on the coverage team, you'll be in position to make your block.
We talked about giving up single points and the risk of running them out. Sometimes you can see an alley like Will Height saw there, but Jim Daly was saying you have to factor in the possibility of a penalty that'll back you up, and that's what's happened to the Roughriders here. They might have been better off conceding the single point. Here's Profile Greer, and not much there against a stingy Saskatchewan defense. That'll bring up second and long as Greg Marshall looks on. He had a little conference there with Greg Battle and Dan Rashovich a few minutes ago, and there's a lot of experience in that Saskatchewan defense.
It really is. You look at Battle and Rashovich, and there's 23 years combined experience between those two players, and you bring the young Tommy Smith in, a tremendous athlete to complement the two, and they have a very solid linebacking core.
Second down and 7. Archer from his end zone guns the pass and has a completion and a first down. David Archer going to Joseph Rogers for the catch.
And Chris, this is what I was talking about when David Archer throws in between the numbers. He is very effective as a quarterback. He gets himself in trouble when he tries to extend the field outside the numbers, but Rogers runs a nice curl route, and he got the cushion, the separation from Ruffin, and he was there for the nice strike from Archer.
Maybe some evidence there too. Often quarterbacks will tell you it's easier to throw into the wind, where Archer can really let fire and not worry about it sailing. Profile Greer again, and they're not able to establish anything on the run against LeBryant, Robinson, and company.
You spoke about Dan Rashovich and Greg Battle. They had their heads right in the middle of that mix also, but LeBryant Robinson has some extra incentive. Whenever you can play against a former team, it seems to always bring out the best in you. He's been moved inside to defensive tackle over the past couple of games. He's had to make some adjustments with the angles, but he's starting to play better at that position.
Second down 8. Archer stands in, delivers, was looking for Robert Gordon, but tight coverage by Terrell Ulmer. And it'll be third down. Just a reminder for viewers in Atlantic Canada tonight, you will see last night's game between Team Canada and Team USA, the World Cup of Hockey final, beginning at 7 o'clock local time. And that is for viewers in Atlantic Canada that unfortunately missed the game last night as Hurricane Hortense blew through.
You were glued to the tube, weren't you?
I don't think I'd want to see it again.
Oh, okay.
Rod Harris. And Harris ducked under a tackle, and he may go for a run. Here's Rod Harris, and he's headed for the end zone. No flags. Touchdown, Saskatchewan. 57 yards for Rod Harris, and Saskatchewan's on the board.
And Chris, that is the first touchdown that Rod Harris has scored since October of 1994. He has to be very happy, but this crowd at Taylor Field is jubilant because the Riders have finally been able to punch it in for a major.
Well, the offense has been unable to get on track, so Harris does it on specialty teams. It was a 37-yard punt, but Harris rumbles 57 yards for the touchdown.
Now, there's been some mishandlings on long snaps trying to get the placement with the wind at their face. Let's see if they can get it down.
Jagus does put it through. And the Saskatchewan Roughriders have the lead. 8:03 to go. First half. At the start of the year, Jim Daly wasn't using Rod Harris on punt returns, had to because of injuries, and he's won the job.
Well, he hasn't been able to get him off of it, and when you can get a player who's excited about playing specialty teams, that's what you want.
Here's Kenny Wilhite, outstanding return man for Ottawa, forced out of bounds. And there is Harris, a favorite receiver of David Archer a year ago.
Well, 2 years ago in Sacramento. Last year he was in Shreveport, but he's been a welcome addition to the Saskatchewan Roughriders. As you see, once he hit the open seam there was no catching him, and he was off to the races, and the Saskatchewan Roughriders are on the scoreboard finally.
So the Saskatchewan Roughriders have the lead without recording a first down so far in the opening half. Greer will try the left side with flags flying, and Profile Greer is up to the 35. Dan Rashovich, the veteran linebacker, with the tackle.
They're going to get Gary Rogers being offsides again. That's the second time he's done that. And once again, one of those costly mistakes that I keep talking about, teams that are having problems create for themselves. Last week, he gambled a couple of times in Toronto, allowing Doug Flutie to escape into the end zone, but you can't do that. I read the lips. Jake sold me out, but I read his lips. He did say 4-1.
Saskatchewan is number 41.
So Rogers gives Ottawa a first and 5 situation.
First down and 5.
Fourth penalty, 30 yards charged against Saskatchewan so far.
David Archer needs to take advantage of this.
Here comes the blitz from Battle, but they dump it off over the middle.
Archer's
and Joseph
pass
Rogers,
is off, and it's good.
That's not much beyond the line of scrimmage, maybe a pickup of a yard.
No, it's not much beyond the line of scrimmage, but it's a positive play because you're picking up yardage. He was able to avoid the blitz and get the ball off. The next time Saskatchewan has to be worried about that he can avoid the blitz and get the ball off, so they may not be so willing to come like that next time.
As David Archer told us yesterday, the idea will be to bite them when they come after us. That time they just took a little bit of a nip out of the Saskatchewan defense. 2nd and 3. Greer on the counter, and he's tripped up at the 37.
Airborne there for a second.
And he'll be short.
The Saskatchewan has already proven that they're very stingy against the ground game. They had some success running Sean Daniels straight ahead early in the first quarter. Now they're trying to run this counter trade where you pull both backside offensive linemen. And when you do that, if the defensive lineman recognizes that they're going away, you get in that hip pocket and follow, and they've been making the plays on it.
Well, that ground game that John Payne wanted to establish here today has fizzled so far. And Wayne Lamley comes in to punt with 6:20 remaining in a defensive struggle here at Taylor Field. Ottawa using as much of that clock as possible. Here's Harris. And this time, better coverage by the Roughriders. So the Ottawa offense gets set to come back on the field with the lead here at Taylor Field.
We've heard so much about concussions with professional athletes over the past years, and we had a look at James Ellingson sitting on the sidelines. He took a tenacious hit in that opening series of the game, and we've seen him wincing on the sidelines, and he may be suffering the effects of a slight concussion.
Definitely in some discomfort at the Ottawa bench as Saskatchewan goes to work with Kevin Mason. Little dump pass, and that's a completion to Robert Mims, who's down to the 52-yard line. A gain of 3, which means Mason and company are -1 total yards offense on the day.
Well, they can't be pleased with Kevin Mason's production, but it's not his fault. Every time he's dropped back to throw a pass, he's taken a hit from an Ottawa defender. Once again, he's dropped by Jeff Cummins on the play, and you can't keep having your quarterback going down because he's going to wear out. He may not throw the interceptions, but he won't finish the game.
Jeff Cummins has been outstanding in this first half. 2nd and 8. Here they come, so they screen it out, and here's Mims. Robert Mims dropped the football. Saskatchewan got back on it. Big number 64, the left guard, John James, saves the day for the Green Riders.
The Mississippi State product. That's one of the things that John James can do, is that he can run. He was in Baltimore last season. We saw him get downfield and deliver a crushing blow last week for Mims in Toronto. This time hustling down the field, and that's what you expect, is the hustle. And if you can get your players to hustle, good things can happen for you. Saskatchewan recovers the fumble.
And they have their first down of the game. That was Lamar McGriggs that stripped the ball away from Mims. 5th fumble of the year for Robert Mims. Mason trying to get outside. Pressure on again. He'll turn it up. And is hit at the 45, which will be close to the original line of scrimmage.
I tell you, at this point, I'm starting to question the decision-making of a Kevin Mason. He had an opportunity to pull up inside his block that James was putting on Swift Birch, and he decided to continue on outside, and he's paying the price, because at the end of this run, he takes a couple of tremendous blows from a couple of Ottawa Roughriders.
Boy, Mason was beat up last week against Toronto, and Swift Birch, a former Argo, was leading the charge again against the rookie, who's getting quite an indoctrination to the CFL. And a timeout has been called. 3:25 to go first half. Mason has been sacked 4 times already today. 13 times in the last 6 quarters.
You talk about the sacks, but you have to talk about the hits on top of that, the repetition of hits that he has to take.
Well, a word from Jim Daly, and Mason goes back. Halftime will feature Robert Mims, who hasn't been able to get on track today, but leads the CFL in rushing. We'll also preview next week's game. What a classic battle it should be. Garcia against Flutie. We expect, although Danny Barrett looked pretty good in a relief role Friday. We'll also try and find some highlights from this first half. Mr. Curry, I won't blame you if they're all defensive plays.
Well, the highlight is being with you.
Here's Mason finding some room on his own, and Swift Birch nailed him, but not before Kevin Mason escaped for a second first down.
Well, you talk about highlights, and you were highlighting next week's matchup. He took a page out of Doug Flutie's playbook right there. The quarterback draw, that is an easy way to slow down a voracious pass rush. And that time, as they were coming on him, he just took it up on himself to pick up another first down.
So Saskatchewan is threatening here as they get the 3-minute warning in the first half.
725 prizes valued in excess of $648,000, including $100,000 in cash. 1996 Camera Gambles and much more.
Saskatchewan's had the ball here in the second, and they've been able to put 10 points up on the scoreboard. A huge advantage, because once again, Ottawa's still going into the win.
53rd meeting in CFL history between the Roughriders. This one billed as the name game. The Rough Riders against the Roughriders.
Well, the Roughriders will win today.
John Daniels drilled back. LeBrian Robinson has been a handful this afternoon.
Well, you know, we spoke about him making the transition from defensive end to defensive tackle. It's not an easy thing to do, especially when you're used to playing out on the corner and you're not playing in a triangle where you have 2 to 3 defensive linemen, offensive linemen chipping on you on every play.
Second and 9. Archer under the gun, dropped the football. It's a free ball at Saskatchewan. Well, it's still free, and the Green Riders, I think, have got it. Saskatchewan football.
Perfect play. We spoke about LeBrian Robinson. He's going to be, you know, he's going to be in front of Greg Battle right here, so he's going to be hit. But watch as he comes around on the play. He's going to catch David Archer in the pocket. And this is what we talk about, someone developing in a position. And LeBrian Robinson has had an excellent game here in the first half today.
Gary Rogers had a couple of shots at it before he finally squeezed the football for Saskatchewan. Let's see if Mason can convert this big turnover. Calls his own number. Spins away from one, and look out. There's 3 more guys in white shirts waiting for him, and Dwayne Knight finished him.
Just to go back to Robinson one more second here. Last week he had a tremendous play against Doug Flutie where he deflected a pass, and Gary Rogers was right there to pick off the interception. And once again, Gary Rogers following his teammate, able to get the fumble recovery this afternoon.
Well, the linebackers, Tommy Smith and Gary Rogers, talking about the big defensive play as Kevin Mason now is faced with 2nd and 12. Mason, better protection, open as farthing, inside the 5, that's a first down. Joe Miro makes sure he doesn't go any further, but suddenly the Saskatchewan Roughriders are in business.
They had just spoke about Dan Farthing not seeing a football, and his game has come full circle. I mean, he's a very quiet possession receiver, but he has a great set of hands, and you know if you get the ball to him, more times than not, he'll come up with the reception, and Saskatchewan's in great field position at the 3.
Well, let's see it. This is where the power running of Robert Mims can take it in. And Mims tripped up in the backfield. Big play by Swift Birch.
You know, it's one of those things I talked about. When you see an offensive lineman pulling, you want to get in his hip pocket. Swift Birch does a great job of it. He saw Keith Hiscock pull down the line of scrimmage. He got on his hip, and he was there to make the tackle on Robert Mims for the loss. And they may lose Robert Mims. He's down on the turf.
Yep, Mims having problems. It's like an ankle.
And that would be a devastating blow. You'd have to move Darren Joseph back to tailback, and he's added some pounds from last season. He's up about 15 or 20.
And what we haven't talked about a whole lot today, not just the offensive line critical to establishing a running game for Mims, but without Bruce Boyko, the regular fullback, Mims is missing him today too. And
well, you see it looked like he might have caught an ankle, and you talk about Bruce Boyko, and he's one of those quiet, unassuming players, and he goes out, he does such a tremendous job game in and game out that you don't even notice him because he's so consistent. And Robert Mims has struggled without his fullback the past 2 games.
Looks like Mims will be okay, and we'll feature him at halftime. Those aren't the numbers we've been accustomed to this year. 12 yards gives him 880 on the season. The CFL leader. 2nd and goal. Mason, quick hitter, incomplete. Curtis Mayfield, the intended receiver. And the field goal unit will have to come on.
You know, Curtis Mayfield last week only had 1 reception in Toronto after coming off his best game of the season versus Winnipeg. And when you look at Saskatchewan's 3 victories this year, Curtis Mayfield has averaged 26.9 yards of reception. In their 8 losses this year, he's only averaged 54 yards a game. And so if he's in the scheme of things offensively, they can look forward to having success.
A little chip shot for Jagus. But again, with the win, the snap and placement are critical. Not a problem. And after the Archer fumble, Saskatchewan adds 3 more and lead by 10 with 13 seconds to play in the first half.
Even though Saskatchewan got the 3 points on the play, they can't be pleased because when you have the ball down inside the 5, the red zone offensively, you need to get a major. It really doesn't serve you a great purpose to get the field goal, although the points are important. You have to find a way to punch it in.
The Ottawa Roughriders trying to end a dismal tailspin away from Frank Clair Stadium. They've lost 18 consecutive road games, dating back to September 18th of '94. And to change that, they'll have to come from behind today. Again, we'll feature Robert Mims, the CFL league leading rusher at halftime, and also set the table for that Calgary-Toronto clash at Skydome next week. And I think we have found a few highlights.
We have. I mean, and some of them are defensive also. I know you don't mind that, but
come to expect it. Well, it's been a tough first half for David Archer, and not likely to gamble here. Sean Daniels right up the middle.
Ball carrier Sean Daniels.
Bobby Jurison there.
Bobby Jurison.
Been a good half for the defensive lineman on either side of the ball.
Ottawa's going to have to go in and do a lot of soul searching offensively. I mean, it's going to need to start with David Archer also, because he's going to have to find a way to give some leadership to this offensive unit. They really haven't put together a real good scheme. He hasn't been able to hit his open receivers, so it's going to have to start there and trickle down.
Well, he's got most of the input on the offense, calling his plays, and he flips the ball away and heads to the locker room to regroup. As Archer and the Roughriders of Ottawa will have to come from behind, trailing 13-3 at halftime.
Years to again become the league's premier rusher, but Mims has beaten the odds. Robert Mims began at the top, breaking the 1,000-yard rushing mark in his first year in the league. Unfortunately, it just meant he had further to fall. But in 1990, he knew he could play, and the Bombers gave him the chance.
You never give the opportunity to play, you can't prove yourself. And basically, I think I got the opportunity to play in 90, and I just went out and tried to prove myself.
91 was a magical year for Mims. He broke 1,700 yards. Life couldn't get any better, but it could get worse, and it did when he was dumped by the Bombers in 92.
I look back at 92, and I wonder myself, situations I can't control, they made a decision that, hey, they want to go with another guy, and I didn't think I was having a bad year, but they did what they did, and hey, that's something that I can't change, and I used to think about it a lot now, but now it doesn't bother me about. But I have to say the only thing that really bothered me that year was not being released. It was no one wanted to pick me up.
And just as quickly as he could cover a CFL field, Mims was forgotten.
You just got to always believe in yourself, no matter what people say about you. If you believe in yourself, you know if you can still play, despite what, someone might say, oh, he's not as good, and tell the other guy. But you know if you can still run the ball, you know if you can still catch. And like I said, you just got to always believe in yourself, because you never know what the Lord has in store for you.
He never gave up, survived an unproductive stay in BC, and now leads the good life again with the Green Riders in Saskatchewan.
I have nothing to prove to anyone. I've played, and I thought I played well. And if I keep putting in my mind, I got to prove something to this person, prove something. The only person I have to prove something to is myself. And I'm not out here trying to keep people happy and make people feel they made a mistake by not picking up Robert Mims. This is the first year I never set any goals. I just said to myself, hey, I just want to go up there and play football and hopefully things work out. That basically was my goal, to come up and hope things work out for me, and they have.
Only 12 yards for Mims in the first half of this game, and he suffered what appeared to be a minor injury. We'll call it the curse of the halftime report, but he's still well on pace for a 1,000-yard season. Here at Taylor Field at Saskatchewan, leading by 10. Bet on the Roughriders to win. The BF Goodrich TA halftime report will continue. Well, the harvest is just about complete. They're calling for a bumper crop on the prairies this year. And here at Taylor Field, the Green Riders lead at halftime. Let's jump ahead 6 days now to a collision of the two best teams in the Canadian Football League. Next Saturday, the Toronto Argonauts and Calgary Stampeders meet at Skydome in Toronto for what could be a Grey Cup preview. If you watch only one game this season, you have to watch this one, the battle of the best, the 10-2 Argonauts versus the 9-3 Stampeders. Both teams are deeply talented in every area, from offense to defense and back again. But the most compelling matchup is this one, the pivots, the Argos' Doug Flutie and his successor in Calgary, Jeff Garcia. For much of the season, Garcia has helped Stamps fans forget about Flutie, but Garcia remembers.
When he was on the field, he was taking care of what needed to be taken care of, and I don't think that's changing over in Toronto. He's got them going in the right direction, and Doug's just a great competitor, and I think that's what makes him such a good winner.
And Flutie is working his magic in Toronto. He's the reason the Argos are 10-2, their best start ever. Toronto fans will settle for nothing less than a Grey Cup appearance. Is next Saturday's game a dress rehearsal?
I hope this is a preview of the Grey Cup because it would only mean that we're in it. I think that, as of right now, there's no doubt about it, the top 2 teams in the league. And this will be a good measuring stick to see where we stand and how close we are to potentially winning a Grey Cup.
Yes, it'll be a huge weekend. We start next Saturday with the Stamps and Argos at Skydome. Toronto should have a season-high crowd. Then Sunday afternoon, Ottawa back home to entertain Hamilton. Riders hoping for a sellout-of-back game, but tickets available to both. As we used to say in wrestling, men and men alive, wrestling fans, get your tickets early. Here again are James and Chris. James, Calgary and Toronto both coming off upset losses this weekend. I suspect, though, that'll only serve to make next weekend's affair more spirited.
Well, there's superiority in the CFL. Both teams at 9-2, and you're looking forward to that contest.
Chris, I'll tell you how this game went for the Saskatchewan offense. 25.5 minutes they went in the first half before they fumbled for their first down.
And by then, they'd already had the lead. So obviously, defense, the big story. And because the offense wasn't going, they had to rely on a specialty teams big play by Rod Harris to get them going.
Well, Rod Harris is the guy that they've brought in to do the job lately on specialty teams, and he's been able to deliver with the great punt return, getting the field position, but the hustling by the rest of the teammates to get the blocks for him.
In the first quarter, I thought Jeff Cummins was the outstanding player on the field. In the second quarter, it might have been LeBryant Robinson, another defensive lineman.
Well, you talked about defense early being a big part. He came around on a twist stunt. David Archie in no way is going to be sitting in the pocket. He was an easy target, and Gary Rogers was right there to get the football on the fumble recovery.
So Saskatchewan has the lead, and they can add to it in the third quarter. And Ottawa just trying to stay in it before the wind advantage they get in the fourth.
Yeah, Chris and James, not to curse the Ottawa Roughriders, but they've gone a long time since they've won outside the province of Ontario. I think October of 1990 was the last time. If they don't get some offense the second half of this game, that horrid streak will continue.
They really struggled at quarterback. David Archie has not had the year that people expected of him. You need a little more from your pivot. He hasn't been able to deliver.
All right, that'll do it for the BF Goodrich TA halftime report. Saskatchewan bidding for its 4th win of this season. They lead at the half. The second half is coming up next.
Backs hoping it will be a far more productive second half. So far, Saskatchewan has had the edge. Home wind advantage has prevailed so far. Green Riders with the lead, and they have the football and the wind to start this second half.
Well, we got to look here at the first half stats, and really nothing from either ball club. Ottawa controlled the ball in the first quarter, so that's where they gained their big disadvantage. Saskatchewan hasn't put anything together offensively. The Harris punt return for the touchdown gave them a commanding lead.
Well, it would appear that the wind is only stiffer in this second half as we look at Paul Vida starting his first game at center for Saskatchewan, and the give to Mims, who's back in to start this third quarter, and still nothing doing. Jermaine Younger, one of the linebackers to fill the hole, and Ottawa felt that with Younger in there, they'd be tougher against the run.
Well, Jermaine Younger has really been filling the middle for the Ottawa Roughriders. He started off the season in Hamilton playing defensive end, but he's moved back to his natural position of middle linebacker, and he's been a big plus for this defense along with Lamar McGriggs.
2nd and 9 from Saskatchewan's 50. And Mason in trouble again. Jeff Cummins, that's an enormous loss back at the 31-yard line. That could be a loss of upwards of 15 yards depending on the spot. They're going to place it at the 35. So a loss of 14.
I think right now as a coaching staff, you really have to start looking at your backup quarterback, Jimmy Kemp, because you're going to actually destroy the confidence of a Kevin Mason with the beating that he has taken over the last 2 games. 15 quarterback sacks in the last game and a half.
Managed the left footer. Did a nice job of fielding that snap. And away goes Kenny Wilhite. Over the 30 to the 31, where Ottawa will put the ball in play for the first time in the second half. David Archer and the Ottawa offense, their first possession of the second half. Into the wind, Profile Greer, and the scat back bounced up to the 35. Got 5. Rashevich the tackle.
Well, when you look at the running game, it really hasn't been effective for either team this afternoon. We are going to look at David Archer's numbers. Only 6 completions in the first half, and you have to expect better numbers than that from David Archer. His unwillingness to play the short passing game has cost him.
Well, he was sacked 5 times in the first meeting between these two teams this year, and Saskatchewan's had a lot of pressure on him. More steamboats this time. He might run with this one. He does, and Archer close to a first down. LeBryant Robinson bringing Archer to the turf, but that should be enough to move the sticks.
You talked about he may run with this one. It took him a while to get to that point of decision and even get to the sticks, but LeBryant Robinson once again picking up where he stopped off in the first half and tracking down David Archer.
That's Jim Daly conferring with his offensive line.
As we get a look at David Archer, not the most nimble of foot of quarterbacks, and he's lumbering along, and he was able to pick up the first down.
Yeah, but he's running against the wind.
Oh, okay.
Slows him down.
Saying he got a big body, in other words.
There's that little dump pass you were looking for, and Greer breaks the tackle, and Profale Greer is into Saskatchewan territory, finally drilled out of bounds. But Greer has a big pickup, and Ottawa is moving the football in the second half.
You know, they say the game is much easier to see up here from this vantage point. They also have assistant coaches a couple of doors down, and this is one of the things that will make your offense very effective. It does 2 things. It slows down the pass rush, and it also stretches the defense where they have to run from sideline to sideline. And you see Saskatchewan having problems when the offensive linemen are able to get out and put blocks on them.
At the Saskatchewan 45, first down Ottawa. Play action. Archer flushed out of the pocket, and he'll run for another first down. Tripped up from behind by Tommy Smith. As you mentioned the first half, former teammates a year ago.
And I think Tommy was looking at this. It's like, no way that David can get away from me. You know, I played against this guy for an entire year in practice, but David Archer showed he had just a bit of elusiveness right here as he was able to get around the corner. And we talked about that gambling from the corner position as a defensive lineman or linebacker. You cannot afford to lose contain, because when you do, there's no extra support.
12 yards to pick up before Smith tripped up the Ottawa quarterback. Profale Greer and Greg Battle, the veteran middle linebacker, there to help bring him down. And when we asked Jim Daly yesterday about Greg Battle, well, you couldn't have got a more glowing review of a football player.
Well, you know, what he brings to the table is so intense as a player and also as a mentor out on the field, because he recognizes what's occurring in front of him. You see how quickly he reacted to that play. He read that counter trade while they were at the line of scrimmage before they got out of their stance.
Jim Daly called Battle an impact player who changed the atmosphere in the locker room immediately. Second and long, and Archer again has to pull it down. Flag down as he lunges to the 26, which is short of the first down, and this, in all likelihood, is holding Ottawa.
Well, I would suspect that, and if you're Saskatchewan, you want to take the penalty because Ottawa is going into the wind. You make them line it up again. You don't want to give them the field goal attempt, because if you back it up 10, it's out of Lamley's range. You see Archer sitting in the pocket. As I spoke about, his unwillingness to play the short passing game. When you're looking deep, things don't develop quick enough. You're going to be forced to eat it or run with the football.
So they do back Ottawa up. Back to the Saskatchewan 45. It'll be second down over and 23.
Now, this is where you take chances defensively. You got to bring some extra people. Look for Saskatchewan to come with the blitz.
And here they come, and they've got Archer for a loss. I don't know if they brought any extra people, but with the way LeBryant Robinson's playing, you don't need anybody else.
Well, I'll tell you, they did bring somebody extra, because LeBryant Robinson had Chuck Este hanging all over his back. So not only did he get the sack, but he had to carry some luggage along with him. You'll see him at the bottom of your screen right here. Watch Chuck Este trying to hang on to help out his quarterback, but to no avail.
That's a 12-yard loss and a big defensive play for Saskatchewan. Boy, Robinson's having a day.
And it shows you how critical that holding penalty was, because it took them back out of field goal range. Now they're forced to punt into this stiff headwind.
And watch this long snap as well. misfires. And the ball bouncing back, and we'll get the no yards.
Flag.
Well, it's barely any yardage on the exchange.
Your game sponsor, Saskatchewan, in its way to Taylor Field. 19
Second and 10 at the 18, as you said. On the motion.
30 years ago, Grey Cup meeting between Ottawa and Saskatchewan, and Ron Lancaster finding Alan Ford in the end zone for a touchdown. 20 years ago, it was the other way around. Clements to Gabriel, the winning score. A couple of memorable Grey Cup games between these two teams. They've actually met 3 times in the Grey Cup game, and there's a pass knocked down by Jeff Cummins. Robinson and Cummins exchanging big defensive plays. A 29-14 score was the same score the first time these two teams met this year.
Well, you know, they were hoping, and they both had high expectations of having a chance to get to the Grey Cup. And you see Alan Ford, who caught that first touchdown pass from Ronnie Lancaster that we showed on those Grey Cup memorable moments.
Ford looking on anxiously as his Roughriders trying to establish some offense. Rick Walters has a catch at midfield. And that's his first catch of the game, an 8-yard completion up to the 55.
Pulled down by
you talk about Alan Ford. He has participation in all 4 of Saskatchewan's Grey Cups that they've been in.
It'll be 3rd down 2.
The last as a general manager in '89.
3rd down and 2. And a punting situation. Al knows about the wins here too, a former punter. And Brent Matic has had a pretty good day.
Now this is one that Ottawa has to concern themselves about handling if it goes beyond the 10-yard line.
Give up one, wouldn't you? But Matic angling it out. So Wilhite had to play it and is forced out at about the 14-yard line. So Matic keeping it in play with the 47-yard punt. And Wilhite, who's been shaken up, got 2 on the run back. Kenny Wilhite still getting attention on the sidelines.
Well, you'll see Rick Walters coming down on the coverage. Willie Hinchcliffe gives him a shove in the back just as he breaks down to make the play, and he rolls up on Kenny Wilhite's knee, and he had to be helped off the field.
David Archer today, 7 of 17 for 117. And Profile Greer with a few yards off the right side.
We'll get a perfect look at what I was talking about. Watch the right knee here of Kenny Wilhite as Rick Walters come down and he rolls up just as he plants it, and you'll see that knee sort of give as he could not get the toe out of the turf in time.
Wilhite, a valuable man on that Ottawa side, both in the secondary and as their return man. 2nd and 8. Rush on Archer, who almost threw one into the hands of Terrell Ulmer. Did, but was fortunate Ulmer didn't squeeze it.
You know, you look at David Archer and how he has struggled today. You have Steve Taylor on the sideline, a player who's been around for about 8 years in the CFL now, who's much more mobile than David Archer, who has become a stationary target in the pocket, and he's pressing. He hasn't had any success, and you might have to start looking at the sidelines.
7.5 minutes to go, 3rd quarter, and Lamley standing in his end zone.
This is the last play with Wayne Lamley as he came down trying to cover on that short punt and just got laid out.
Randy Straczynski, the former Regina Ram, with the block on Lamley.
Looked like a Ram butting one down there.
And again, Ottawa was running down the 20-second clock, and Lamley's going to give up 2.
Not going to give it up easy.
Seconds, he better be careful because Darren Joseph's got him lined up, and now Lamley's out. So they run a few more seconds off the clock and find themselves behind by an even dozen.
Well, that's the smart decision because you weren't going to gain any field position in Wayne Lamley's last punt. Only covered 12 yards in the exchange, and so that's a good coaching move by Coach John Payne.
Well, following this game, will head east to Toronto and join Brian Williams for the Woodbine Million. Again, Skip Away is the favorite as horse racing returns to CBC Sports.
And, you know, you look at the Saskatchewan Roughriders, they're going to get the ball in this series. You look at their young quarterback, Kevin Mason's been sacked 6 times already this afternoon, and he struggled the last time that he came off the field. And I said you have to worry about his confidence, because when you're trying to develop a young quarterback, if he doesn't get a chance to stay in a rhythm, he can lose that. And so you might want to think about utilizing Jimmy Kemp, your young quarterback you made a trade with Montreal for, who has some CFL experience. May not be a bad decision. To see him confirmed with Don Narcisse, who has yet to catch a ball, and his 155 game streak could be in jeopardy.
There's Kemp wearing the headset. No, Jim Daly really excited about the prospects of 3 young quarterbacks. This isn't a franchise that can go out and get afford a marquee quarterback, so they're developing them, and they've got some promise there with the youngster Kemp.
Heath Rylance, who started a couple games early this year, who went down with a concussion.
Yeah, and he had problems with even concentration up to a week ago, but Rylance may not be too far away from returning. High kick. And this is Harris, and he is nailed. Tommy Henry with the tackle. And just a 4-yard kickoff return. Well, there's Donald Narcisse, and as you mentioned, 155 games in his CFL career, a catch at least one in every game, and that record is now in jeopardy with 6:55 to go in the third quarter in a game where there have been very few completions to Saskatchewan receivers.
Kevin Mason only has the 4 completions, and you think about it, Donald Narcisse had 123 receptions last season.
Tell you what, the rookie quarterback knows he better get it to number 80 sometime today. He's found Rick Walters again. That's the second straight completion to the backup slot Walters, and it's a 14-yard gain.
Well, Chris, I spoke about it earlier, especially when you have a windy day, how much success you can have throwing the short pass down the middle of the field. It's the shortest line to the receiver. The ball is not going to get caught up in the wind, and you can have some success.
Here's Scott Hendrickson looking on.
First and 10,
the injured center, Paul Bynum, taking his spot. It's been a better offensive line for Saskatchewan in this second half, but not much there off the left side as Stacey Evans was waiting in the hole.
Well, what I've seen today is the running game for both teams is non-existent. If you're going to have some success, you have to go by the airways, and you have to look at the short pass as a running play.
And that's a compliment to Ottawa, because Saskatchewan came into the game with the leading runner in the league in Robert Mims, 4th best team rushing overall, but they've been shut down today.
Joe Moss is the architect of that defensive scheme for Ottawa.
Second down, they set up the screen. Here's Mims to midfield, but he'll be short of the first down. That's Lamar McGriggs with the tackle.
One of the things that young quarterbacks have a problem with is learning how to set up the screen. You can throw it, but knowing the depth to release the football, that time he got too deep. When you back up 15 yards before you release the ball, your back still has to run 5 just to get back to the line of scrimmage, and it gave Ottawa time to come over with the pursuit, led by McGriggs, to stop him short of the first down.
Well, Jim Daly's got a good day out of Maddox, but he's blocked here. Big play. And the block was by Dave Denal, who in the first meeting between these two teams was playing for the Green Riders. But Dave Denal has a big punt block, second in as many games for Ottawa. In their victory over Montreal, it was a punt block by Ray Bernard that resulted in a touchdown.
Dave Denal is one of those exceptional athletes. As you say, started the year here in Saskatchewan. Came out of junior football with the Burlington Braves and got a clean run at Maddich on the play. You got to put a hat on them and retract them when they come off the line of scrimmage. Dave Denal had a free run. Now can David Archer capitalize on the opportunity?
Ottawa down by 12, but remember, they've got the wind in the 4th quarter. Let's see if Archer can convert the punt block into points. He's going up top looking for Greer, who can't make the diving catch.
And I spoke about Archer has a problem when he throws outside the numbers. And you see that time how the ball got away from him and drifted towards the sideline.
I would say any of those touch passes today, considering that wind, would be an adventure.
It has been with only 7 completions. Now this is the point where he's going to have to force himself to go more inside the numbers and try to pick up the yardage for the first down because they're not in field goal range.
They've converted only 4 of 17 second down situations. He's looking downfield. It's picked off. Harold Brown, the Saskatchewan native, with the interception. But you know what? In the grand scheme of things, that might be as good as a punt for Ottawa. Ottawa turns it over and trails by a dozen. Saskatchewan's Harold Brown as his second pick of the year.
And he did a wonderful job of disguising the coverage. He lined up at the halfback position, floated back to the free safety. You'll see him right in the middle of your screen, number 3, floating back, and he fooled David Archer. And spoke about the secondary needing to come up with a big game, and they've come up big thus far.
At the 11, Saskatchewan first down, and Mason looking for an open man, and he's zeroing in on Rick Walters again. This one incomplete.
You know, I talked about Kevin Mason and his momentum and his emotions, and he's been rattled. If you watch him sitting in the pocket, he has those hot feet now. His feet are constantly pitter-pattering, and he hasn't gotten himself set. Keep an eye on his feet. He's nervous. He's been hit so many times that he knows he's going to get hit again, and he's just not sitting in there throwing the football.
Second and 10 as Jeff Cummins gets into the starting blocks again. Rush on Mason. That's Flip Birch downfield, open man, and guess who? Donald Narcisse has his streak extended to 156 games.
And he did it in spectacular fashion.
I don't know if there's been many games where he's had to wait this long, and in these conditions, you wondered, was today the day it was going to end?
Well, you know, you think about a guy with 156 consecutive games, you know he has great hands. The concentration to go down to the turf and make the reception.
19-yard pickup up to the 30-yard line. First down over the middle. There's another catch for Rod Harris. Dwayne Knight with the tackle, but Mason looking a little sharper here.
You know, I want to go back to Donald Narcisse for 1 second. You know, he's never really been looked at as one of the great receivers in the CFL. 7 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. This year, he may fall short of that, but a sure Hall of Famer.
Absolutely. In striking range, 700 yards shy of 10,000 in his career. Here's Mims breaking it outside, and Robert Mims to midfield. They have 3 straight first downs. 14 yards for Mims.
Well, this is what happens when your passing game is having some success. All of a sudden, now you get defensive linemen rattled. Now watch as the commitment is closed down inside, and Mims is able to bounce that. His peripheral vision is his greatest asset because he's able to read things as they're developing in front of him.
First down, Riders from midfield. Here comes Cummins. Mason spun away from 2 men and walks the tightrope down the sidelines.
Ball carrier for quarterback Kevin Mason.
7 yards for Mason. I'll tell you what, give this kid credit. He's got a lot of guts. He's been battered for 2 games now, and he just hangs in there.
Well, you see an animated Joe Moss on the sideline, and you got to give Kevin full kudos for the beating that he has taken and been able to withstand it and keep bouncing back. And now he seems to be putting together a march. He's picked up 2 first downs, make that 3 to keep this drive alive.
Joe Moss is really steamed. It looked like there could have been a holding call in the backfield. No flag, and
is there ever holding in this league?
There's the pass for Farthing, and he was drilled by Kenny Wilhite. Good to see Wilhite back in there. And now, where's the placement? And there's going to be a real argument at the Ottawa bench. Looks like they're giving Farthing's forward progress enough for a first down.
Well, he's going to come up about a foot short of the first down, but you can't talk about where he landed. He had gained the field position, and he was driven back by Kenny Wilhite. Watch Kenny Wilhite come up with a tremendous hit, but also Farthing got a generous spot because he was only up at the 46-yard line, and he's at the 45.5 on the spot.
Yep, 3rd and inches. Bobby Jurison in the backfield, and Mason keeps for the first down.
Section 25, roll 40, seat 37. You're still in it.
Big drive for Saskatchewan now as the clock is running down in this 3rd quarter.
Let's keep this drive alive.
You know, we saw a situation last week in Toronto with Kevin Mason dueling against Doug Flutie, and for the first 30 minutes of that football game was able to hold his own, had a very solid performance and came unraveled in the second half. But here in the second half, he seemed to have regained his composure here in the 4th quarter.
Quarterback drop, open up the middle, and he has another first down. Swift Birch finally brought him down, but Kevin Mason moving the sticks.
I said 4th quarter, 3rd quarter I meant, but Kevin Mason, his second quarterback sneak, able to pick up another first down and keep the drive marching for Saskatchewan.
12-point lead for Saskatchewan with 15 minutes to play.
Welcome back to Taylor Field and a great defensive battle between the Roughriders. You get Younger right here, the middle linebacker. Kevin Mason recognizes that he's going to leave, and he comes with the quarterback sneak. This is learning under fire. When the middle linebacker goes, there's no support in the back end. He picks up a first down.
Ball at the Ottawa 33. It's a first down. Saskatchewan, Robert Mims. And Mims to the 31 has a couple.
Now, this is a true test for Saskatchewan. Now, they're going into the win. If they can get some points out of this drive right here, this will really put Ottawa up against the wall. And David Archer has struggled for 3 quarters. And you have to wonder, does he have enough gas in the tank to lead his team?
Well, Don Moss, a little agitated on the sidelines. Saskatchewan's drive started at their own 10.
Ball's on the Ottawa 31-yard line.
And for the first time today, they've been able to put together a real march. Here comes the Ottawa blitz. Harris with the catch, but nailed immediately. Jason Jakovich, the safety, knocked him down at the 30. And it'll be 3rd down.
Well, Rod Harris hasn't put the big numbers up that they expected of him this year. Now, this is a big decision right here for Saskatchewan. Jagus, will they send him out on the field? Yes, they are, and it's going to be a challenge. He's going to have to kick this from about 35 yards.
12-point lead if Jagus makes it. It's 15 or more than 2 converted touchdowns. But the risk from here, again, we talked about it earlier, James, is the low trajectory you might need to cut through the wind could lead to a block.
And Lamley missed one wide right from just about this same position in the 1st quarter.
And again, we might have a fake. Jimmy Kemp, the backup quarterback, is the holder. Puts it down for Jagus, and this one was deflected out of bounds.
But you talked about the low trajectory of the ball. The ball barely cleared the line of scrimmage, and it allowed a defender to get a hand on it. You know, actually, when you look at that, I think he may be angling that out of bounds. We saw that a couple times in Calgary over the past couple of seasons when they had problems with their punting, and McLaughlin would come in and angle the ball out of bounds, and looked like Jagus actually attempted to angle that one out inside the 10.
Well, instead it goes for a single point, and it's now a 13-point Saskatchewan lead, and the ball comes out to the 35.
Now, can David Archer guide his troops down the field and at least put some points on the scoreboard?
First and 10, 35 yards.
Has some time, but can't find anybody. Tried to swing it out to Profile Greer. Incomplete. And Archer just threw that away.
Well, the problem David Archer's had is throwing the ball wide. When he's gone over the middle, he's been effective. LeBrant Robinson once again applying pressure. The two defensive tackles for Saskatchewan, Tim Edwards and LeBrant Robinson, has had a tremendous day getting that push up the middle of the field.
Archer now 7 for 21. A woeful 33%. Over the middle, and that's through the hands of Willie Hinchcliffe. Incomplete, and Archer has to scrape himself off the turf again.
And you wonder how many times as a quarterback can he get himself up. Coming into this weekend, David Archer, efficiency rating-wise, was the lowest rated of all the starting quarterbacks in the CFL. And all the pressure that he's been getting, Tim Edwards this time, the two defensive tackles for Saskatchewan, have been consistent.
David 1 for 6 in the second half, and the frustration written all over his face.
Well, you have to look at it. He calls his own plays, so a lot of the pressure that he's under, he creates.
Anthony Drawhorn on the return, up to the 35. So Saskatchewan with the football in the lead after that 52-yard punt.
Back at Taylor Field, Saskatchewan leads by 13, November 19th, 95, as Taylor Field ever looked as good as it did on Grey Cup Sunday. Seating capacity expanded to 55,000. Every one of the seats occupied for the game between Calgary and Baltimore. They still talk about Grey Cup here, and there may have been a carryover effect, Chris, as the Riders have averaged 23,000 this season, but did the stadium ever look great on that day?
Did it ever?
Has there ever been a better CFL show put on than what Saskatchewan did last year in hosting the 1995 Grey Cup?
Yeah, it looked good on the best fans in the league. Here in the heartland of the Canadian Football League. Here's Rod Harris. And Harris gets by that first man and is across the 40-yard line. Tommy Henry with the tackle.
And that actually was a lateral on that play because Harris came back behind his quarterback Mason to catch that supposedly hit screen. Became a hitch toss on the play, but picked up 8 yards. Make that 7 yards. You see Donald Narcisse, not only does he catch the football, but he came in that time and just planted Tommy Henry on the play.
Mason 11 for 18, 88 yards in the game, and here's Mims thundering for a first down off the left side. Jermaine Younger with the tackle. Mims in the first meeting against Ottawa this year had 116 yards. He has 4 100-yard games this year, and he doesn't pick his spots. He's rushed for over 100 against Edmonton, Montreal, and Toronto, as well as Ottawa.
You know, he's been very productive, and in the 3 wins that they've had this year, Robert Mims has averaged 122 yards on the ground.
Trying to eat up yardage in the clock now. Mason in trouble, flag down, and Mason stays up. He'll go down now. No, he won't. Breaking the tackle, and finally up to the 45, didn't get back to the line of scrimmage. Younger finally got him to the turf.
Mason was brought down by
Mason, a finger in the eye, and all that was going for naught anyway because of the holding call.
Well, you know, that's one of the things that they've seen is that they can blitz Mason and he will become rattled, and that time he had to run for his life, but a great effort nevertheless. Now the big decision, will make that Ottawa decline the penalty?
They decline.
Now this is a point on the field where Kevin Mason has to understand what is between the hashes, because if he can throw it there, he can pick up a first down. You'll see right here as he gets scraped in the eye by Knight as he comes by and finishes up on the tackle, but he needs to look down the middle of the field. Dan Farthing and Rod Harris.
2nd and 12. Here comes the 4-man rush, and it's incomplete. Mason delivered the football as he was crunched.
89, Rayfield.
Looked like Jeff Cummins.
And I'll tell you, Chris, Dan Farthing was sitting on the far side of the field at the midfield stripe, wide open, not a player around him, and he could have easily picked up the first down, but this offensive line has not been able to keep the rush off of Kevin Mason. You'll see the young quarterback sitting in the pocket, and the pocket just collapsed. Cummins comes in once again. This defensive line for Ottawa's had an outstanding afternoon.
Still time on the clock for Ottawa, but they've got to show something offensively. Look at the wind knock that down. Saskatchewan may have to just stop it because it was rolling backwards. And great field position now. 10-yard punt.
Well, Maddich almost recovered that when he was the green rider that was in there on top of the ball, so it shouldn't be a no-yard penalty on the play. They should wave off the flag.
If he was the only one.
Well, you'll see as that ball gets knocked down by the wind as it crosses the line of scrimmage. But watch Maddich as he'll come into the picture late. He's 1-3, and he'll run in there and make an attempt for the football.
So no flag.
And once he invades that 5-yard umbrella circle, as you want to call it, any other green rider can come in there also.
Well, again, there is still time, but only if Ottawa can get it going on offense. Archer outside, Gordon can't squeeze it.
Archer's pass attempt for 84, Robert Gordon incomplete.
One completion for David Archer in the second half.
When you talk about a quarterback struggling, you're looking at David Archer. As I mentioned in the last series, he calls his own plays. They do not come in from the sideline. And his unwillingness to throw the ball down the middle of the field has cost him once again today.
There's the guy in the middle of the field that is defending a great veteran, Greg Paddle. Here's an open man. It's Rogers, hauled down from behind. Nice play by Drawhorn, or that was big yardage. Nevertheless, it's a first down, Ottawa.
And that was one of those plays where he came back over the middle. One of the things about David Archer, his first 3 years in the league, he played an American brand of CFL football. That meant he had an unlimited roster of American talent to choose from. If he lost someone, he could always fill that with another capable player. Now that he's playing under CFL rules, he's the player who's had to make the adjustment to this league.
First down, give to Greer. And Greer has 3. Bobby Jurison on the tackle. You look back, first quarter, when Ottawa had the wind and they botched 2 consecutive field goal attempts. Those 6 points that look very large right now.
Steve Taylor couldn't get the ball down on the tee, so Lamley never did get an opportunity to get the ball in the air. But now the pressure is on Saskatchewan's defensive front. Can they come up with the big defensive play once again?
2nd and 7. The fake to Greer. Robinson with the sack. LaBryant Robinson with a brilliant afternoon. That's his 2nd sack, and he's been pressuring David Archer all day.
I tell you, 3 weeks ago was in Calgary for a Labor Day game and saw Rodney Harding, an old veteran, having a tremendous afternoon. And I'm seeing the same type of game this afternoon from LaBryant Robinson, the former Ottawa Roughrider, who has been moved into the defensive tackle position. Not only is he playing a new position, but he is dominating a new position.
He beat James Monroe, and then Robert Stevenson got to the quarterback. No wonder Jim Daly quit his job in Ottawa when Dexter Manley was handed the job ahead of LaBryant Robinson. 48-yard field goal attempt. Lamley puts it up and misses. And Saskatchewan will gladly concede the single point as Mayfield dances around and puts his knee down. So again, it's a 12-point Saskatchewan lead, 7:36 to go.
The Woodbine Million coming up from Toronto, where a deeply talented field, the best 3-year-olds in North America, set to decide the race. $600,000 to the winner. Skip Away's the favorite. The track is fast. Rain is threatening as it is here. So it's the Woodbine Million coming up. And again, for viewers in the Maritimes, the telecast of the final of the World Cup of Hockey will be replayed beginning at 7 o'clock local time. And here at Taylor Field, Saskatchewan, 7.5 minutes away, Chris, from their 4th win of the season.
The Ottawa Roughriders have tried 4 field goals today. 2 were not pinned by Steve Taylor, and 2 have been missed by Wayne Lamley. 12-point lead. And there is Robert Mims with a big carry to move the sticks. Jason Jakovich made the tackle, but Mims starting to churn out the yards in the second half.
Well, the Saskatchewan offensive line, we maligned them most of this afternoon, but I guess when it counts and the game is on the line and you need to churn some time off the clock, they're getting off the football.
8 first downs in the second half for Kevin Mason.
Backers, both of them.
Mims again. Lubo Zizakovic and company holding on after a couple of yards for Mims.
Well, it's been a war down in the pits this afternoon. Both defenses have played well, and we're going to look at it right here coming off the ball, and you got to get the guys stood up, and they weren't able to do that against Ottawa, and they were able to limit the gain by Mims on the run.
Mims, 32 years of age, at least listed that.
That's a young guy, though, Chris.
Jim Daly says he's 38.
He hasn't been telling the truth.
2nd and 8. Here comes the blitz, and Dwayne Knight can't bring him down. Swift Birch trying to track him, and he gets rid of the football, and old Kevin Mason paid a price.
Kevin Mason covering the real estate.
Kevin Mason is in some difficulty.
And he's going to need some assistance to get up, but the young quarterback has to know how to get rid of the ball early. He cannot keep running like that with defenders in hot pursuit like that. He needs to know when the backer's coming up the middle. Knight came through clean once again and tracked him down to the sideline and made him pay the price.
Well, it's been non-stop punishment for the last 2 games, but he hasn't taken anything quite like this hit.
Watch Knight as he closes and he goes up high. The rule in football is you cannot deliver a blow up above the shoulders. That is a very questionable hit and a non-call by the officials.
There's no Houston to his feet. What a lick. Dwayne Knight.
Well, Dwayne Knight was the original player to come through clean on the blitz and flushed him out of the pocket, but was relentless in his pursuit. And you'll see the shot at the end of the play where he comes up above the shoulder pads in the throat and head area. As an official, you're supposed to throw the flag on that play, and there was none thrown, and the young quarterback is down. Not saying that he went in trying to hurt him, but you have to protect the quarterbacks when you have the opportunity.
So Jimmy Kemp will come in. And you can see Mason being helped off.
You know, he's taken a heck of a beating the past 2 ball games, last week in Toronto and here today at Taylor Field. And it's it's not without understanding that he's having to be helped off the field.
Well, this time they are not going to bother with a punt attempt. Frank Jagus will come in.
It's 3rd and 8.
He's going to angle this one to his left.
That's how bad the wind has gotten in the second half. Jagus getting it out of bounds. Will Height could only watch it sail away. 12-point lead, 5:29 to go. And now David Archer seeing it slip away. 29-yard placement by Jagus.
Well, Chris, the shot on Kevin Mason that James talked about may have been to the head, but the problem is with his left knee. They feel he's got a partially torn ligament in his left knee. He was absolutely writhing in agony on the sidelines here. He's gone off on the golf cart and will not return for this game, and most likely not the next one.
Well, that's a left knee that was hurt against Winnipeg 2 weeks ago. There's Archer looking downfield. Joseph Rogers can't reach it. But even prior to the game against Toronto, Kevin Mason was on crutches up until the Thursday prior to the game, so they were amazed that he got through the last game, considering the 9 sacks.
The Labor Day Classic here versus Winnipeg, when he was originally injured on the play, and he was able to bounce back the past couple of weeks. But once again, we see David Archer. And when you're playing with the wind and you have a player running deep, and especially when they're short, you're going to have to let the ball tail, so that means you got to get some air under it and let him run under it, because you can't put it on a rope when the defensive backs are taller.
2nd and 10. Here they come. Knocked down at the line. Gary Rogers climbed the ladder to knock it down.
Archer's pass.
But LeBrant Robinson once again applying pressure.
Incomplete. 3rd and 10.
And that tandem has worked well the past 2 weeks. We're going to see Robinson applying the pressure, getting the push up the middle, and forcing Archer to the side, and Gary Rogers able to go up and bat down the ball. But Robinson has an outstanding game.
Has he ever? 7 years in the league, 3 years now with Saskatchewan, as Lamley booms it downfield. Drawhorn picking his way by a couple of riders up to the 38. Jeff Cummins, the tackle, 57-yard punt, and now Jimmy Kemp in relief of an injured Kevin Mason.
Well, hold on now, 27 looked real good last time.
Jimmy Kemp is not in an unaccustomed role. He started out in Sacramento, moved on to San Antonio with that team, started 3 games last year for San Antonio, so now he's back in here, and he started a couple games early this season for Montreal.
That was Kemp conferring with Jim Daly and offensive line coach Bill Dole, and here he is going to number 27, Robert Mims.
You speak about a Dole, doesn't his father confer with the Dole also?
That's right. You got Kemp and Dole south of the border and at the Saskatchewan bench.
Last up, number 98.
I think this combination's a little better than the other.
Well, one's related. The Kemps are of the same family.
Good for 4, though. Second down.
I'm not sure if Bill and Robert are.
No, and his father also did some time on Calgary's practice roster back in 1959 when you were a teenager.
Now that's your territory. There's a quick hitter and a completion. Curtis Mayfield, the super fly, brings one in.
And he's been quiet today. You get a good look. Watch the slant. See, a lot of receivers want to round it off. And when you break it off quickly, you give the quarterback time to put the ball where it should be. And Kemp had the ball on time.
1st and 10, Saskatchewan on their 53.
Well, Mayfield has been unable to pad his stats that saw him 3rd in the league in receiving coming in.
Hit him.
There's Kemp over the middle, picked off. Lamar McGriggs, a former NFL strong safety with the New York Giants and Minnesota Vikings, has the interception, and a last gasp for Ottawa coming up with 2:51 to play. Well, unless David Archer can get this offense untracked, it'll be 19 consecutive road losses for the Ottawa Roughriders. Here's Archer dumping it over the middle, and Rogers with the catch. Wrapped up quickly by Vincent Donaldson. Extra defensive back into the game now. Last road win was in Toronto in '94. The last road victory outside the province of Ontario was in Winnipeg in 1990. Here's a quick hitter and a second straight completion. This is the first of the day to Andre Bolduc.
Well, you know, Bolduc had the big game against Montreal where he came in and had just under 100 yards rushing. He was a converted receiver that they used at running back in that game. But Saskatchewan now is going with their dime package. They're going to put the game in the hands of their defensive backs.
Archer sidelines, and Hinchcliffe can't pull it down. And in that package, it's a little surprising that Greg Battle is the guy that has to come out.
Well, you would think about it with Dan Rasevich being the elder statesman out there on defense, that he might be the one that they remove. And Greg Battle is an excellent coverage linebacker, but they feel like, I guess, that Dan Rasevich also, who is a pretty good pass rusher, can cover both roles.
Archer now 10 for 29.
And he's not willing to go over the middle consistently. That last pass to Hinchcliffe carried out of bounds.
2nd and 10. Over the middle this time, and Rogers makes the catch for a first down at the 32. Aaron Ruffin holding on.
You know, you can repeat a point time and time again, and you know, you hate to keep saying it during a broadcast, but you know, you have assistant coaches sitting a couple of doors down, and they have to recognize the same thing that we're recognizing up here.
Archer fighting the clock now, looking downfield, Robert Gordon, and it was a stride too far for Gordon.
And there was Sean Daniels sitting at the 25-yard line, not a green rider in sight. But sometime when you get greedy as a quarterback and you want to get it all, you grow impatient, and Dave Archer has done that all afternoon.
Looked like he had it all there, though. Just let the wind have it sail away on him.
Well, you'll see it as he throws it up, and I spoke about you got to get some air under it so that those short receivers can run under the football.
2nd and 10. Better protection. There's a completion, and this could be a score as it's down inside the 10 to the 6-yard line, and Bolduc, who has been quiet all day, has 2 catches in this drive, that for 24 yards, and he's slow to get up.
Well, he's completed 12 passes a day, and that's David Archer, and I would beg to say that 10 of those passes have been over the middle to his inside game.
Dave Van Bellingham helped prevent the touchdown. Bolduc's second catch. Archer taken down by Jurison after the play, but Archer was telling us yesterday he thinks the youngster out of Concordia could be a future Canadian star, that he has all the tools and that instinct for the game.
Well, you know, he has a good understanding and recognition, and that's hard to find in young players. They say it generally takes a year or two for them to develop, but here's a young talent that is coming to the CFL out of Concordia. He's been forced to play both receiver and running back, and he's been very productive at both positions this season.
Bolduc has to go to the sidelines for 3 plays. The story, 2:01 to play. And Bolduc taking it down. And they have spotted it at the 7. So Ottawa trying to get into that end zone as soon as possible. And then we might see a short kickoff, or they may put it in the hands of the defense to turn it over on downs quickly.
Well, it was the hit from the linebacker, Tommy Smith, coming back to help the free safety, Van Bellingham, on the play, who didn't close quick enough.
Archer called his own number and was tripped up. And that's Tommy Smith with another big play.
I think even David Archer was shocked to think that he might be able to get through there and pick up yardage, because that's not a play that's in David Archer's arsenal, the quarterback draw.
Smith got him around the ankles. Otherwise, it was 6.
Yeah, if he had been a swifter-footed quarterback, he may have been able to elude Smith, but not David Archer.
6th play of the drive. They've gone 51 yards. Greer, touchdown. Profale Greer from David Archer with 90 seconds left on the clock.
I'll say it one more time. David Archer can have success when he's willing to throw the ball over the middle and in between the numbers and hashes. But when he goes outside, he creates problems for himself, and now he's gotten his team on the scoreboard with a major.
Well, he may get another chance to exercise the game plan.
Well, it was a great pass and a very quick read by David Archer to get the ball to Greer, and when you get him matched up on a linebacker, Greer should win that battle.
6-point lead. 1 or 2 points really academic here, so they'll just kick the single by Lamley. So it's 16-11.
Saskatchewan 16, Ottawa 11.
And now I ask Coach Curry, whether or not you do go for the short kick, or do you put it in the hands of the defense?
I think you have to put it in the hands of the defense because you have the wind at your back and you have an opportunity to pin Saskatchewan down deep. Who knows, you may even get a single on the kickoff, but Jimmy Kemp hasn't had many reps this afternoon at quarterback, so make him work to pick up first down.
That's the first receiving touchdown for Profile Greer in the CFL.
Come on, Nick, get a turnover now.
Well, let's see what John Payne elects to do here with the win.
We get one more look at this TD by David Archer. A quick pass by David Archer and a missed tackle by the free safety on the play. And David Archer not lifting up that right arm. He's taking a beating. He wants to save anything he has left in it for one more opportunity.
I think if they were going against the wind, it might be a little easier to try a short kickoff. But with the wind at Lamley's back.
Well, you got Ulmer playing up at the 25-yard line. If you're Wayne Lamley, you can get this over his head quite easily and possibly pick up the single.
Don't think Ottawa wants the single, though. They just as soon pin them a little deeper than the 35. Here's Ulmer. Oh, he took a hit, but ran right through it. That's a great return up to the 40. Nick Richards swung and missed. 20-yard return.
Now, this is a real test for Jimmy Kemp and also Joe Moss, who has architected a pretty good defensive scheme this afternoon. Does he have one more series left in his defensive unit to come up big?
Last series, Kemp threw the interception, replacing the injured Kevin Mason.
And Lamar McGriggs made the interception, and he's been a big plus for this Ottawa defense in the 3 games that he's played.
They'll go to Mims. And Mims nailed after a pickup of 1. And that was McGriggs again. They'll use the timeout.
Lamar McGriggs closed from the opposite side on the field. Play recognition by a defender. Saw that it was going away, got in his angle of pursuit, and dropped him at a minimal gain.
So the timeout by Ottawa, should they stop the Green Riders on the next play, they should get the ball back with about 50 seconds to go.
Well, you know, they've had a tough time punting into the wind. The last attempt, they brought Jaggers in the last 2 and had him try to angle it out of bounds to gain the field position. But now this is a real critical play. Will Kemp keep it and run with it, as they're discussing on the sideline?
I think they've got to run the ball and just take off that much time off the clock.
Well, I'd keep the ball in Jimmy Kemp's hand, get him outside on a boot, give him that dual option. Maybe he can find the receiver coming back and pick up the first down.
Has to get to his own 50 for a first down. Fake to Mims, in trouble. He does throw. It's picked off. And the Ottawa Roughriders have the ball with 35 seconds left. Lubo Zizakovic with the interception. And John Payne's team still has life.
And Joe Moss's unit came up with the big play. We saw Lubo in the first half get his first sack of the game. And this play, he's there for the deflection off of Rod Harris's hands and laterals back to Younger. A very dangerous play, but Ottawa keeps the ball at the 35. Now it's in the hands of David Archer. Can he pull him through?
And there's plenty of time left. Minute 9. That's the danger, putting the ball in the air. Archer over the middle, completion. That's Bolduc back in the game, and his 3rd catch in this 4th quarter.
And what David Archer has found, Chris, is that soft spot in the middle of the field in Saskatchewan secondary. Doug Flutie had success there last week. He's pulled a page from the playbook.
A minute to go. Here's the rush, looking for Rogers. Can't bring it down.
And I'm going to tell you, Saskatchewan got away with one. They got away with one. There was an interference call that was missed.
I think the intended receiver was Greer, and he was interfered with.
Well, make that Bryce Bevel had a handful of jersey from the line of scrimmage, and the official let it go.
Ball at the 22. receivers go right. 2 to the left. 2nd and 10. Archer steps up. Into the end zone. Touchdown. Robert Gordon.
You talk about a team coming back from a nothing game to create something when they didn't have anything there. David Archer's been able to come back and architect 2 drives to put his team in the lead with just under a minute to go in the football game.
How do you like that? 49 seconds left on the clock. The Ottawa Roughriders have their first lead since the safety in the opening quarter.
And this is the first time that they have led since October of '94 in Winnipeg this late in the game, away from Ottawa.
Well, the veteran quarterback has had a tough afternoon. But the game's 60 minutes long, and he has found a way in the final minutes to put Ottawa ahead 18-16. Robert Gordon with the touchdown catch, his 4th of the year. LeBrant
Robinson missed on a great effort, but David Archer kept his poise, stepped up in the pocket as you teach a quarterback. If you step up in the pocket, it's like a point guard on a basketball team. When you penetrate down the line, down the lane, you break down a defense and people have to commit. Bolduc was open, touchdown the result.
3 plays, 35 yards. They only needed 20 seconds. And Robert Gordon has put the Roughriders in the lead. It's a 2-point advantage. Still time for Saskatchewan, but the task enormous with Jimmy Kemp, who's been on the sidelines almost all day. And now it'll be Kemp having to work against the wind, trying to get them into field goal range.
And it goes back to the move of position from the slot receiver to the wide receiver for this game for Gordon, and it pays big dividends for Ottawa.
A booming kick into the end zone, and it will roll to the touchline and out. 95-yard kickoff from Lamley.
And I spoke about maybe Saskatchewan should have done that the last time that they kicked off, and you talked about giving up the single. Wouldn't have looked so bad right now, but now they're struggling.
Saskatchewan's ball.
No single, though. 25-yard line, it comes out. 2-point deficit for Kemp, who checks his play selection.
An interception again. Well, he's been finding Roughriders, but in the wrong jersey this afternoon.
Yeah, all 3 passes have been completed by Kemp, but 2 into opposition hands. He's 1 for 3 with 2 intercepts.
I think we had an offside
because
Paul Biden was still holding on while play was going on.
Everybody else moved, except the center. Well, Saskatchewan's lost 7 of 8. This would be 8 of 9. And a bitter pill for Jim Daly.
Come on, Keith. Come on now.
As they get set to take on Winnipeg next Sunday. The schedule is certainly in Saskatchewan's corner. Well, they've got BC, then Winnipeg, Hamilton, and Winnipeg again. But now it's the Ottawa Roughriders helping their playoff cause, barring a big play by Saskatchewan in this last minute.
Well, this takes you back to that old adage that football is a 60-minute game. Saskatchewan had played 58 solid minutes of football and forgot to close it out.
First and 15.
It's also the variable of the wind. It can create this kind of situation where things can happen in a hurry. Here's Narcisse, and that's picked off. Donald Narcisse couldn't bring it in. Joe Miro does. And Miro won't go down. Finally, at the 25, Joe Miro with the interception, the 3rd thrown by Jimmy Kemp, and the 3rd pick of the year by Miro.
And you talk about Jimmy Kemp putting the ball in the air 4 times, and all 4 passes completed to Roughriders, 3 to the wrong jersey. And you talk about the wind. That ball floated on him, throwing it into the wind. It carried, and it cost him because it was out of the reach of Narcisse.
That's tough. You're watching for 58 minutes, and you have to come in like that.
Against Ottawa.
And it all gets away.
But Joe Merrill, and that's the thing, you're sitting back trying to play prevent defense at his halfback position. He's there for the deflection, but after the play, after the interception, he's picking up, trying to pick up extra yardage to get a penalty after the end of the play for rough play. But Ottawa should be able to kill the clock from here on in.
I don't think anybody in Ottawa will mind me saying, after 6 years of waiting for their team to win one outside Ontario, that this will be an ugly win.
It's an ugly win, but it's a win nevertheless. And you have to look at the things that have occurred in Ottawa since Jim Durrell has come on board. He has rallied the troops, the city. Everyone has been productive on the field. The fans have come out with their support. David Archer is going to get Ottawa's first win on the road, as you say, in 6 years, and a well-deserved win nevertheless.
And next week, our CBC crew will be at Frank Clair Stadium in Ottawa. They'll have a huge throng there to watch the suddenly hot Roughriders meeting the Hamilton Tiger Cats.
Quarterback keeps the ball, takes a loss.
And that'll be a matchup for third place in the East.
Well, you know, Hamilton is fallen off a bit lately. They've really been struggling. They've had a lot of problems at quarterback, and Ottawa's had some problems today at quarterback, but I think you can build something on what occurred today. I mean, if David Archer goes back and see where he had the success today in throwing the ball over the middle and is willing to stick with that type of scheme, they could they could string together several victories and get on a playoff run.
David Archer puts down the knee, and in stunning fashion, the Ottawa Roughriders roaring back in the final 2 minutes to upend the hometown Saskatchewan Roughriders in a shocker, 18-16.
You know, you talk about shocking victories, and this may be the biggest of the year when you look at this game on paper and what Ottawa had not done away from home over the past couple of seasons, and to come in here and struggle for 58 minutes, blew enormous opportunities to get points, but when it counted the most in the last 2 series of the game, they were able to go down, execute, and put the 2 majors on the board for the victory.
And Jimmy Kemp will have to chalk this one up to experience as we join Scotto.
All right, Chris, here is John Payne, who has just enjoyed Ottawa's first win outside Ontario since October of 1990. Did you know it had been that long? Because you haven't been with the team that long.
Well, I did know. Our media director told me about it last week, but I don't like to dwell on negatives, so we really didn't say anything about it. I thought it was a great effort by our defense today. Offensively, we had a hard time getting on track. Saskatchewan did a good job against us defensively. They had a good scheme. The coaching staff did a good job. We were a little bit lucky to win, I think.
Yeah, that might be the understatement of this whole affair. John, I think we have your reaction on videotape when you knew you'd finally won it. Well, in fact, we've already seen it. We're at center field here with no monitor. That's why I'm kind of flying blind. But, John, how did you win this one? Because nothing went right for the first 58 minutes.
Well, we just came up with some big plays. The defense came up with really 2 big plays at the end, and we were fortunate enough to get it in the end zone to Bobby Gordon there at the end, and that was the difference in the game. We sputtered most of the game offensively, but the guys never gave up, and defensive staff did a good job. Offensively, we just kept fighting, and finally something happened.
All right, John, thanks for your time. Enjoyed this one, as dramatic as it was. And so now the Riders are on a 2-game win streak, and here is Bobby Gordon, who got the winning touchdown pass from David Archer. Describe it for us, Bobby.
Well, it was a fade route, and he played it really good, and Dave scrambled a little bit, and I came back to the ball, and ended up with a touchdown.
Did you think you'd be the go-to guy when Zizakovic picked off that one to give you the chance to win it?
I always want to be the go-to guy, but you never know. You got to run every play like you're getting the ball, and I just came up with it. You know, could have been any guy what I came up with tonight, and we won.
With all that Ottawa's gone through this season, now you're on a 2-game win streak. How much better does it feel?
Oh, it feels real good. You know, first half of the season, it was shaky for us, but, you know, in this league, it's the second half of the season and how you finish, and we're looking good right now.
How lucky do you feel to win this one? Because as I said to John Payne, virtually nothing went right for this team in the first 58 minutes.
You know, the wind conditions were bad, but it was for both teams, and we sputtered, you know, the whole game, and it was a shaky game, but we came over the win, you know, so we feel good. We're going to win next week, too.
All right, Bobby, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
And so the Ottawa Roughriders win in dramatic fashion here at Taylor Field. 18-16, the final will return in just a moment.